Silent Hill, one of the greatest horror franchises to come out of Japan. It's dark, it's gritty, and it's a psychological nightmare. Nobody can quite grasp the feeling of dread you get from playing through the games for the very first time, and yet, their somber reminder of life is all too relatable. It's truly a wild ride, and I recommend picking up the game for anyone who hasn't played it yet. With that said, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Figure Friday. I'm your host Tama, and today we'll be looking at the Numbskull Designs 9-inch replica statue of Heather Mason from Silent Hill 3. Let's begin. Heather. The main character of Silent Hill 3 is easily one of the most recognizable characters in the series. With her signature vest and skirt combo, she stands proudly alongside the brilliantly designed Robbie Rabbit as a mascot for both the series and Konami as a whole. The design of the figure is pretty well put together, and I really enjoy seeing an additional piece laying upon the base as nicely as this one does. So much of this figure is fantastic. Robbie looks great. Both of their paint jobs are nicely detailed, with blood, dirt, deeply reflecting the game's visual style. Heather's pose feels stoic and confident as she wipes away the blood from her face while holding her gum, which is a nice touch, by the way. The colors aren't too muted or dark, and everything seems pretty... No. Everything seemed pretty great, but there's a huge flaw that takes this figure down on multiple levels. How did they get everything so right, then completely stumble when it came down to any character's most important feature, the face? It looks downright awful when you really get a good look at it. The nose is huge, the jaw is thin, and the eyes look like something out of my worst nightmares. They're so tiny that you can barely see the whites, and the pupils are huge. The brown coloring is barely noticeable unless you look very closely. They just don't look good. I'm disappointed. This figure had everything going for it. It was nearly great. But of course, how could I forget that this is made by Numbskull Designs? For some reason, they always manage to screw something up with the way they present character faces, and that's why I typically avoid trying to buy their products. This is certainly no exception. There's a bright side, though, if you want to call it that. At the angle where Robbie is facing you, Heather's arm perfectly covers up the lackluster details of the face in such a way where it actually looks kind of decent. Robbie looks fantastic, at least. They did a great job texturing him to feel grimy and stained. He's sat there unassumingly and slumps over with a menacing look on his face. It's really something special. Unfortunately, I feel that Robbie looks a lot better than the rest of the figure, so it kind of detracts from the overall enjoyment of having it displayed on your shelf. The centerpiece should be Heather, not Robbie, and anything that takes away from the main spotlight probably shouldn't be included in the first place. The base is also quite beautiful. I love the mucky carousel ride look, and the little plastic stones add a fun carnival element to it. It's very well textured and molded with multiple points of elevation, unlike most other bases, which are completely plain, so I'd call it a win in my book. At least I would say that if the base wasn't completely hollow. In fact, the weight of the figure is surprisingly light. I wouldn't be surprised if the entirety of it is all hollow. Considering that this figure is made in one piece, it makes everything feel a bit cheap. I can't say the quality is bad, but it certainly feels like Numskull went through some effort to keep costs down instead of focusing on the higher level of quality that figure owners really want. Speaking of the cost, this figure set me back a whopping $129.99 USD. For the size, it's not a bad price, but I do feel a bit cheated out of my money for the quality that I receive. Of course, the figure is actually 10 inches tall if you include the base, but as advertised, it is 9 inches without. It is worth noting that the base is 5.5 inches in diameter, so it does take up a little bit of space. I don't think this figure is all that bad though, in all honesty. Because despite my issues and concerns, I do actually kind of like this figure. Sure, the face is bad, or really bad, but At the right angles, you can kind of just ignore it and focus on the parts of the figure that look truly excellent. So with that, I give this figure my final rating of a C-. It's just below average, and it's a bit costly. For such a cheap feeling figure, I can't forgive them for messing up so badly on the important details of the face. But what we have here looks kind of well thought out and does please me enough to keep it around in my collection. Heather could have just used a little bit more love and care, but ultimately, it's not too bad. I used to love casually speedrunning Silent Hill 3, so I'm happy just being able to keep it part of my gaming history on my shelf. Did Numskull do a good job, or did they screw up big time? Let me know what you guys think down below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you guys next week for yet another Figure Friday video. Take care, and bye-bye.